So now one more graph. So productivity. What we've begun to understand is that, so when I first started, I had this idea, this notion that I'm going to build with a brand new building material, and just like Corbusier, built with reinforced concrete 100 years ago, it's going to change the nature and the way that these buildings look. But actually that's only half of it. That's only half of the story really, because what we've realized is that the way in which we build is all about concrete. The way in which we instruct builders, the way that builders work on site is all about concrete buildings, all about steel buildings. And that you realize that, this is a graph about productivity. And this is the digital age, so arguably since the 95. So the last 30 or so years, since the arrival of the digital age, productivity in construction has gone up by 1.6%. And productivity across manufacturing has gone up by over 100%. In fact, productivity in construction has gone down over the last 100 years. So we're now less efficient. Our buildings take longer and cost more since the arrival of modernism. There's irony. So if you look at car manufacturers, a Daimler in 1870, a Nissan factory today in the UK, keyhole surgery today, the invention of anaesthetics there, arrival of 1890s. Construction then, and construction today. So nothing's changed. We're doing things exactly the same way. So what we need to do is to start looking, and as architects, taking the lead on this as well. Understanding that actually, our profession, what we do, is about being master builders. Is about understanding every aspect of construction and design. Because otherwise, as a profession, if we're not careful, in a generation or two, we'll just be the people at the end of the table saying what colour things are, So this is a CLT modular housing factory. We're working on 3 different ones of these at the moment, and we've been to car plants, manufacturing assembly plants, to really understand how these places work. And it's been absolutely fascinating. So we're building in this one factory 5,000 homes a year from CLT volumetric boxes here. So you build the boxes in the factory with a construction workforce where you can have proper apprenticeships where they're employed full time forever. They can have pensions and holidays. And also you can employ the other 50% of the population that currently you don't see much on construction sites. This is really beginning to actually change the nature of construction, change the opportunities for construction, take it out of those dirty kind of concrete building sites and put it into kind of safe, decent working environment. And you can, and I'm just kind of practicing how I talk about this, I'm not exactly sure how this is, but you can begin to change the way you think about your relationships between the architect and the consumer. So what we have is when we have a panel, these panels 30 meters by 3.5 meters, and they go through a CNC machine, and that's where they're cut down. And in a factory, you need to repeat that process, because that's how factories work, is by repeating the same process over and over again. But the file that goes into that cutting machine can be different every time. So that process is retained, but the product can be completely different. So that means that each one of those modular boxes can be completely different from the one that was produced before it. So that then begins to give us an idea about choice. Because these arrive on site with the kitchens and the bathrooms and everything completely installed. So then we have this idea we can actually begin to involve the people that we're building these houses for in choice. We can say to them, what kind of kitchen would you like? What kind of bathroom would you like? What colour would you like your sitting room walls to be? But we can also say to them, how many bedrooms do you want? What kind of facade material should we have? So the idea of these kind of these massive towers everywhere, with these white boxes, these sufficiently mundane white boxes inside, which nobody can really dislike or particularly like. They're just kind of involved in these facts. Actually, we can begin to change that notion of architecture, involve a kind of choice. If you look at a Mitsubishi GS, which is a kind of chassis from about 5 years ago, there are 14 models on 6 brands. If you buy an Audi A4, you have 1 million choice variations on an Audi A4. So the difference between that kind of involvement with your client and how we can begin to understand what the implications of that could be in architecture is something that we're beginning to really grapple with and to think about. So for now, we're working on prototypes. So several different prototypes. We've got an understanding of actually how you begin to design. And one of the ways in which that is you get the postcode of your building site, you look at that postcode and you see how big a truck you can get to the site, you see how wide the truck can be, and then you understand what kind of nature those volumetric boxes can be on the back of that truck. So we've got one that goes on site in end of April, 7 stories, 65 apartments, and we'll be on site with that for 5 months. And what we're doing with this company is developing an app for iPads, and that every time somebody puts a deposit down on those flats, they get that app, and then they can choose, they can begin to be involved in the design of their homes. We're also working on large projects, this one in South London, so 25-story, 214 apartments in this one. So what started for us 15 years ago was an idea about low carbon buildings, about sustainability, about kind of having an understanding of the implications of our work on the environment, that we would work with a replenishable material, not one that's scraped off the surface of the planet, but actually one that you can grow more of. And that we then realized that the buildings that we were building were healthy buildings, that it's, you know, that people who live in natural environments are less stressed, have slower heart rates, children are happier, you sleep better at night, all these things by being surrounded by a natural material. And that we would work with rural economies. So even though we're densifying our cities, we could understand that the implications of this would really kind of like affect everybody in the country of this kind of architecture and construction. And that we could make beautiful buildings, solid buildings. You know, when you build a concrete building, what people call a concrete building, it's just concrete floor slabs and columns. And then the rest of the walls are stud work, just plasterboard and stud work. You know, these aren't proper buildings. These aren't firm, solid buildings. You can't hang your shelves where you want. You can't open a window. You know, when we first finished my house, my next door neighbour, Dan, when I went away on summer holiday, Dan cut a bathroom window with a chainsaw. Anyway, he put it back. But, so where was I? So these are beautiful, firm, functional, delightful buildings, solid buildings. And so these are buildings where we can repeat this process. We can introduce choice. We can begin to understand about a mechanization, manufacturing of buildings. And so we see this not just as a change in a construction material, as a change in a building material, a change in the way in which we design and where we see our responsibilities as architects, but an opportunity for a complete construction revolution to change the way that we build and think about buildings. And then this is one of the images that we took to planning with our first big building, Murray Grove. And this is the number of tree seeds that it took to grow the trees that built the building. Thank you.